I cannot be silent.
Back when Eisenhower was the president, golf courses is where most of his time was spent. So I never really listened to what the president said, because in general I believed that the general was politically dead. But he always seemed to know when the muscles were about to be flexed, because I remember him saying something, mumbling something about a military-industrial complex.
As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our home nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problem, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent.
Each one reach one, each one time.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.
Empowering the body, mind, and spirit. This is We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney.
I am Phil Restino, one of the co-hosts, and the other co-host is our good friend Larry Pinckney. And Larry, as many of you know already, is a longtime activist, veteran of the original Black Panther Party. He's lived life, man. 10-year political prisoner. He's editorial board member and columnist, weekly columnist for, right now he's with the IntrepidReport.com. And, he's got, 4 decades worth of, work that can be accessed at the website blackactivistwg.org. blackactivistwg.org. And we really encourage you to go over there and look at some of Larry's work. What we like to do before we bring on our guest is introduce Larry and see if he has anything new to say. And if not, then we'll go right into the guest. But as I mentioned, Larry is a columnist, and he puts out work on a regular basis. And Larry, you may want to mention what you're writing about this week and where to direct the listeners to if they want to take a look at it. Larry, are you with us?
Yeah, so I'd like to definitely thanks, Bill. I want to thank the audience for tuning in, and I want to give a big thanks to Dave, who is such an incredible worker in terms of, if it weren't for Dave, I really doubt that we would be on the air. And he has done and does so much for not only us as far as Wolf Spirit Radio is concerned, but for so many others. So thank you so much, Dave. And to our audience, thank you. As far as what I'm going to be writing about, I'm going to let that be a surprise. I've always tried to keep people interested, but I let it suffice for me to say that it's definitely going to be intriguing. I like to get people to critically think in my column. So just go to, as you mentioned, Phil, blackactivistwg.org. It stands for Black Activist Writers Guild, but it's blackactivistwg.org. You'll find, 4 decades of work, going all the way back over 4 decades to 1968 to the present. And you can find my writings currently. My current writings, I'm with Intrepid Report. That's intrepidreport.com. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Phil. I'm very excited about our guest this evening, so be looking forward to listening to what he has to say and perhaps chiming in a bit.
Okay, Larry. Thanks very much, Larry. Glad you're here, and again, folks, please do go over to blackactivistwg.org and take a look at Larry's work and share it with others. But tonight we have a special guest. As many of you know, November 22nd, 2013, that's this coming Friday, will mark the 50th anniversary of the murder of President John F. Kennedy. And there's a lot of folks talking about it, and thankfully we were able to get one of the researchers and activists that does a tremendous amount of work on this topic. And his name is Jonathan Mark. And he's as I mentioned, a JFK researcher and activist, as well as a publisher of an online news magazine. They call it an e-zine, E-Z-I-N-E, and that is Flyby News. And you can access the publication there at Flyby, F-L-Y-B-Y, news, News.com. And you'll see a great body of work that Jonathan Mark has been doing. Jonathan Mark, as I mentioned, is the founder and publisher of the very informative online e-zine, flybynews.com, and he is based out of Western Massachusetts. In addition to publishing Flyby News, Jonathan has been very active in the community, conducting interviews of whistleblowers and other experts in their respective fields of interest, and broadcast those interviews to the community on local television and on the internet. He is the creator of the video production Dark Legacy, JFK, and 9/11. The film tackles 9/11 within the context that such an event and cover-up could never have taken place unless other coups d'etats and cover-ups happened first. Dark Legacy, George Bush and the Murder of John F. Kennedy, is a documentary film by John Hankey that exposes the Dallas 1963 perpetrators and why that matters today. And for more information, you can see the links at flybynews.com, and there's a link there for Dark Legacy, JFK, and 9/11. I think now is a good time to bring on our special guest, JFK researcher and activist and publisher of flybynews.com, Mr. Jonathan Mark. Jonathan, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm right here. Thank you.
Oh, great. Welcome to the program. I know this has been a very busy time for you with all the activities you're involved in with the commemoration of the murder of President John F. Kennedy. So we truly appreciate you taking the time tonight to be with us. I did a little bit of an intro there about you, but what we'd like to do is ask you yourself to fill in the blanks and tell our audience yourself a little bit more about you and the work you've done and are doing, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I've had a good background in the late 60s, early 70s in the transformation of myself as what I would call like an all-American sort of kid to realizing that things were very, very wrong, and then you remember about the JFK assassination, and that happened when I was 12 years old, and it just meant much more than I could actually comprehend at the time. And then as I went along with my development, I was able to develop myself around an area where there was a lot of consciousness, and Professor Carl Grossman was giving a slide presentation in 1997 regarding the Cassini, NASA's Cassini launching and flyby of Earth with a spaceship that had like 72.3 pounds of highly radioactive plutonium on board, and it was using the gravity assist as an acceleration. So when they launched the Cassini, instead of going directly to Saturn, they went in the opposite direction towards Venus and did 2 flybys around Venus, and then came for an Earth flyby on August 18, 1999. It was traveling around 40,000 miles per hour, which comes to about 10 miles per second. And with that speed, it wouldn't take long if they had a little mistake for the craft to re-enter the atmosphere, and it would have burnt up and released a major amount of radiation that would expose 5 billion people at the time, and be spread in a way that would be able to be ingested and breathed. From the work of scientists, I realized how dangerous this radiation was. Once it's inside the body, it only takes like an electron or an alpha wave element that would initiate the cancers that would happen on a cell level, which would then could go out of control. So there was like a lot of issues of why they would take this risk with this amount of plutonium. And then Carl Grossman would show me the website of the U.S. military planning to dominate the world by entering and placing weapons into space and taking control by taking over the higher ground, as they would say militarily. And so after the flyby of Earth by the Cassini, and after doing that work to expose it, I decided to publish Flyby News, all the news fit to transmit in the post-Cassini flyby era for life survival in the 21st century. And that was our focus. It wasn't just one flyby, it was the whole system that was connected to the expansion of the arms race and what that entailed. So I was basically following guidance of the and following the path of the military-industrial complex with this work with putting weapons in space and overturning the treaties for using space for peace, and the anti-ballistic missile treaty was able to be terminated after the events of 9/11, based on Bush having total control of the Congress and no longer wanting to maintain a treaty that stopped weapons from entering space. And I know Reagan would say it was for defensive purposes, and that's where Larry and Phil, you and I have a connection there with Bob Bowman.
Bob Bowman, yes.
And I interviewed him at the Greenfield Community Television Station and learned of his work as a nuclear engineer, a fighter Air Force pilot, and he ran the Star Wars program. He had a PhD in nuclear engineering for the Star Wars program under Presidents Ford and Carter. And so when we met, mostly both inspired by the events of September 11th and the truth to confront that, we found out that we had an interesting history and some connections. And I think at first he was saying that the launching of Cassini had minimal risk, but as I mentioned, this was about the flyby, which was going at such speeds that it had no protection of that radiation from being exposed to many, many people, and so we kind of found ourselves on even ground. Him as a whistleblower for the fake Star Wars program that was supposed to be for defense, but really for offense, and 9/11, which we both could see from Building 7 the obvious nature that a building doesn't fall that way. It wasn't hit by an airplane. It had to be taken down. and that is what I call a false flag event, and there was a cover-up, and so we just had to deal with these issues. So Flyby News is guided by the military-industrial complex, and when I finally got to the point of 12 years of reporting news, I wanted to get the best videos I found on the internet that would expose 4 major conspiracies, and this is JFK and 9/11, and the 2 others that were included in the 4 is the moon landing hoax and the Federal Reserve System, which turns 100 this December 23rd. So we not only have the 50th anniversary of Kennedy, we also have the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve System within almost a month of each other. And both of those 2 issues are very related, and I produced a film called JFK and the Fed that shows how Kennedy was planning on bypassing the Federal Reserve System by printing $500 silver-backed certificates and not having to pay that interest. So it could be the people's money rather than this private Federal Reserve System, which really is a private group that no one really knows who operates and what in the world they're really doing regarding giving incentives for what I call the world wars and the military-industrial complex. It wouldn't have happened unless they globalized money and gave an incentive for banksters to benefit from expanding the military by having globalized systems so they can never lose. As long as they produce the weapons and explode them, they can resupply them. And
yes,
that's the type of system that we've been under for a long time.
And John F. Kennedy saw that and took a stand, and
Exactly.
and the powers that be, the ones that where the money ends, or starts when you follow the money, and that's what I think that's the rule of thumb, is just follow the money and see where it ends. And it ends to the, what's that got to do with the wars? What's that got to do with Democrats and Republicans and killing the president and 9/11 and the moon landing and NASA and all the money involved in it? It's got everything to do with it. It's all tied together, and I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, Jonathan.
Well, John Hankey's film, he was what I call an expert researcher on the Kennedy assassination, and showed the J. Edgar Hoover memo naming George Bush of the CIA as involved in the cover-up with the anti-Castro Cubans. But his documentary, called Dark Legacy, George Bush and the Murder of John F. Kennedy, is very brilliant, which inspired me. And so I used the part 1 of his film in my film compilation as the main inspiration that kind of combined what the change that we took from the 63, where Kennedy was finally headed towards. And he might have been the last individual as a president that could act as an individual since. And every president ever since was under a control to maintain the cover-up and to maintain the pseudo-nature of democracy and the Constitution, because they were not protecting it. And it's been subservient to this group that have these multitude coup d'etats, which I feel was emboldened by the 1947 National Security Act that was signed by Harry Truman, and basically meant that they could form these secret societies that had no oversight, and based on national security interests, they had the right to, with their own interpretation of that, as going beyond the Constitution in their actions. And that's where we started recruiting Nazis after World War II in what's called Operation
Paperclip, yes.
Paperclip, right. And they were incorporated into the intelligence agencies and the military weapons directions to embolden this organization because of the creation of the new enemy, which was communists in Russia, and Kennedy was going to destroy that enemy by uniting and forming a peace direction that would ultimately be involved with abolishing all weapons of mass destruction and working with the United Nations for the purpose. In his great speech to the United Nations, where he said mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. He woke up after the Cuban Missile Crisis and was planning on getting out of Vietnam and working with Khrushchev to enable the world to live in greater security without such weapons pointed at each other. And so we're in a big mess since then, because the war's expanded now to a global, and you have all these nuclear power plants everywhere, and it just creates the element of insecurity rather than security, which is really the purpose of the military, so they can maintain that sort of control and destabilization, funding, and and ability for having the biggest guns around. And that's our financial special interest development in our country, and it certainly has an ending at some point. We all know that, and how it ends and transforms itself is the purpose of the movie production that I made, because we're not only showing these major problems, but we're trying to propose potential solutions. And that would come from direct democracy and having an initiative that each person would have a vote for enabling new investigations and amending the Constitution to give the people a direct voice in this government. And I think the only way we would get enough people to demand that right, because it's the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, based on the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. But how do we unite with our citizens so we can accept that power? And I think we need more truth, and so that's why I've been exposing the conspiracies. And even though you do get a lot of resistance for any conspiracy that you try to expose, I think connecting the dots of various conspiracies helps the person not just get trapped in one conspiracy, and you only go so far in there, and then because the general population really doesn't want to know the truth. So how do you reach that element where you can then make it so that they have to realize the truth, and then we can create the element of awareness that would then enable a truth commission, which I feel like is the greatest chance. If the change can happen from within, and those within the system, like our whistleblowers, and been partaking in that, if the society was willing to offer amnesty for truth, and any crime could be absolved at to a certain period by disclosing it, and like the Truth and Reconciliation of the some of the democracy that happened in South Africa, then the truth would be pouring through on all the crimes, and the crimes are so significant that to me, just having it come out is almost enough of what I need to have for justice to reclaim itself and begin again. Because right now it doesn't exist except for an interpretation by an elitist system that has engaged a new type of slavery and just the prison industrial system and the justice system based on the sort of non-proportion element of people serving in these prisons, and then they do slave labor and create incentives for maintaining these prisons to be controlled. And then you realize that a lot of what's going on in Afghanistan has a lot to do with heroin production and distribution.
Sure.
And so there's tremendous hypocrisy, and this all comes through with black operations. And so you get people like Osama bin Laden as a boogeyman being generated all over the world with new ways of the spooks scaring people and controlling the agenda. And that's what the 2000 election theft, which enabled also the 2001 events of September 11th.
Yes.
To really be engaged. And it was a coup d'etat of an acceleration, but the main coup was the 63 when they killed Kennedy. That was the end of any freedom and individual as a president to represent the citizens. It was taken over by cabal, and they maintained criminal control over it since.
And again, a coup d'etat is an overthrow.
Yes. Yes.
It's an overthrow. Our government of, for, and by the people, to the extent it was at that time, was overthrown by this cabal. And you mentioned the 47 National Security Act, and which birthed the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency and all this you said secret societies, but basically this secret group of people that are unaccountable to the law, and where were they birthed out of? The OSS. They were birthed out of the secret societies, weren't they, Jonathan? You know, the folks coming out of Yale and Skull and Bones and that crowd. You mentioned the film, and we do want to distinguish between Jonathan's video, Dark Legacy, JFK, and 9/11. Distinguish that from the documentary by John Hankey, which is a wonderful documentary, Dark Legacy, George Bush. That's the documentary film that I believe you'll be screening this week in Greenfield, Mass. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yes, Thursday night, 7 o'clock on Main Street in Greenfield, Massachusetts, at the Garden Cinema. We're renting out one of their theaters for the screening of that film by John Hankey, and after that film we're showing the short called Dark Legacy, JFK and the Fed, which was taken out of my that video compilation that has many films in it, but just this short for then. And then the following day, on November 22nd at 1 p.m. at the Greenfield Community Television Station, we're going to have a public forum that would include video clips, like a multimedia event, as well as presentations by individuals, an open mic for the public to make statements about the impact of that day and what we can do about it, from 1 to 5 p.m. at the studio there at 393 Main Street in Greenfield on the third floor. And those two events to me is the culmination of like almost 15 years of work since the Cassini flyby that is utilizing the anniversaries of those two events, the Federal Reserve and JFK, to show their linkage and the connection to our whole generation. And we're all affected by it. I was 12 when Kennedy was killed, and then you had many other assassinations that followed that, and then you could see the pattern and see the Vietnam War, accelerated, and no matter what was going on, there was this force pushing and controlling the media, which is, we mentioned Operation Paperclip and Operation
Mockingbird?
Mockingbird, yes.
Yes.
Was the CIA ability to take over the media for maintaining control over the population. William Colby was quoted as saying the CIA owns everyone of major significance in the mainstream media, and that was a while ago, and that's how they could pull off such a coup d'etat in 1963 by this powerful mechanism of television, using it for another sense of reality or justification that is highly deceptive and criminal, in the sense that the Constitution was destroyed that day in 1963, and most of us didn't know of it for many, many years. And so 50 years is a good enough time to look back and see the significance of it and why these last 50 years have gone the way they have gone, rather than having any opportunity for making real change or transformation. The system has taken over by a criminal, almost a mafioso type of element, where they had Murder Incorporated as their code name. And Mary's Mosaic,
Operation 40 and all that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Operation Gladio, and my film does touch upon September 11th in 1973 in Chile, 10 years after the Kennedy coup. Here we kill with our own CIA forces and military the president of a country that was elected democratically, and we help with Kissinger's abilities to.
Another Nobel Peace Prize laureate. The murder of John F. Kennedy happened in broad daylight. And that was a message to anyone else who wanted to challenge the powers that be, like Kennedy did. And that's why we haven't had another Kennedy since then, another man or woman of John F. Kennedy's medal. But because the American people didn't deal with it, and still to this day haven't really been dealing with it, that gave us Vietnam. That gave us the first Gulf War, with the young woman lying to Congress saying they threw babies out of the incubators, and I mean, how many times you got to be lied to before it's now it's shame on me and not shame on them. Power concedes nothing without a demand, and Larry and I speak about this quite often on the program. That this peace and justice is not going to be given to us. We got to take it back. It's been taken from us, And Larry, that's a quote from Frederick Douglass, and you've been the Black Panther Party termed this as the struggle, and it's a fight, man. It ain't going to be given to us. We want our country back. We want our liberties back. We want the freedoms that were once protected by the Constitution, which still exists, but it's up to us to demand that it be enforced. It's up to us to do something about it. And Larry, I'd like to bring you in here if you don't mind, and maybe elaborate a little more on what I just brought up as far as not dealing with the Kennedy murder 50 years ago and to this day, and as a result of not dealing with it, where we are today, and what's the answer? We got to start dealing with it. But I'm putting words into your mouth, Larry. I'll let you speak for yourself.
Well, the thing, as you said, is certainly that's very accurate. But as Jonathan pointed out, in terms of specifically honing in on the Kennedy assassination, the Kennedy assassination was not just the Kennedy assassination. It was the assassination of any kind of liberty, democracy, or justice that this country had. It was the assassination of the people by an elite. That's what the Kennedy assassination was. It was the assassination of our civil and human rights, black, white, brown, red, yellow. It was the assassination of freedom of the press. It was the assassination of truth. It was and what this means is that today, in the year 2013, as a result of this outrage, that, as you're correct, Phil, the people of this nation have yet to really deal with it. I'm so glad, Jonathan, that you linked to what happened on September the 11th, 1973. We're talking approximately 10 years after the Kennedy assassination. We saw the assassination of the liberties and justice of people in Chile with the murder of the democratically elected then President Salvador Allende by the Central Intelligence Agency, AT&T, and all the other nefarious, basically agencies that were involved. But this began long before 1973. It goes back to the Kennedy assassination, and we really need to dot the I's and cross the T's. And I just sort of reiterating in my own way, Phil, what Jonathan has been saying. We need to understand that we have Afghanistan today thanks to what happened 50 years ago. When I say Afghanistan, I'm talking about the debacle in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, and basically throughout the world, where the United States has well over, and I repeat, well over 1,200 bases around the world. How could that possibly be for defense? It's not for defense. It's for offense and control. All of this goes back, though, to the assassination of the people, if you will, not just John F. Kennedy, but the assassination of the American people. So I'm gonna cut off there. Jonathan, please continue. Please continue. Phil, that's my response. Jonathan, I'm intrigued and I'm listening very closely.
Well, thank you, Larry. But Jonathan, if you don't mind, this is a good time to bring in why it's important to know who did it and how. Because if we don't know that, we don't get anywhere, you know. In the movie, the documentary Dark Legacy, George Bush and the Murder of John F. Kennedy, I went to the website for it. And in the About section, it says, relying exclusively on government documents, and you mentioned this earlier, Jonathan, statements from the best witnesses available, and the words from the mouths of the killers themselves, Dark Legacy produces a thoroughly substantiated criminal indictment of George Herbert Walker Bush, establishing beyond a reasonable doubt his guilt as a CIA supervisor in the conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy. If we could present this evidence to a jury in Texas, he would pay with his life. And you know, we've got to get real about this and pursue who and when, where, and how. And you mentioned the CIA, the anti-Castro Cubans, as you mentioned on the telephone to me yesterday when we were talking about that, where Hoover put that in his memo, but what he was really referring to was that team of E. Howard Hunt and the other CIA guys, the Bay of Pig guys, the guys that were ticked off at Kennedy for not going along with the Bay of Pig invasion. And you follow these guys back to 1947, you know, when the National Security Act was passed, under Truman. You know, these guys were World War II. They were in the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. You know, it's the same guys. You can follow where how this happened, who was behind it. And until you have to treat this like any other crime, I think, you know, investigate the crime and follow the money and the old key bono, who benefits, and why we don't treat these things like crimes. Well, they do that play on us, the lone nut, and then the media sells it. As long as it's a lone nut, then it can't be anyone else, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, no conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is intergenerational too, because like George Bush's senior's father, Prescott Bush, another skull and bones man, along with George Jr., had his funds blocked for financing the Nazis during World War II. And then you go back a little further in the 1930s, and under FDR, there was an attempted military coup d'etat to form a a Nazi type of government in the U.S. in the 30s, and a real hero of this country, General Smedley Butler, went along with it in order to expose it, and he exposed it, the plot in front of Congress, and it was stopped. But meanwhile, the perpetrators were able to continue their financial schemes that led to this infiltration of the U.S. intelligence agencies and military back right after World War II, and the 63 coup d'etat was the cementing element where they then took over the ability of this country to go in any other direction but from the vantage point of the military-industrial complex and those representing them, which has a lot to do with the banksters doing all the funding and wanting to maintain a elite control over the multitudes that were now having their own communication systems. They were now communicating with each other, so they stepped up their element of control, and so 9/11 in 2001 was the most significant in-your-face, false flag operation you can get, and they condition people not to want to know the truth, and if somebody gets too close to the truth, like Michael Hastings from the Rolling Stone, he was killed in a suspicious car crash 4 a.m. When he was known to have been doing a news story on the CIA director Brennan, and so you can't be any more in your face, and then to see how that wasn't followed up. So, because we don't have a media or a justice system, we have to have a transformation, and that's why I support a truth commission. That if the elites finally want to go back on their destructive element of a path towards dissension and chaos and planetary destruction, we can then begin over and even provide amnesty for all of them based on truth to stop this element of deception, because this is a war on truth. It's not a war on anything but the truth. And without the truth, all we have is falsehood and like a 1984 George Orwell creation. And that's the big battle right now. It has it's not just about one issue; it's about all the issues. And that's why I covered the moon landing issue. It's one of those things that makes everyone humble, because most of us all believed in this at some point in our lives and for a big part of our lives. So I had to research this for over 5 years, showing a film publicly, asking for statements, to finally break free of my own conditioning to say, yeah, there's a lot of evidence, and the fact that they haven't gone back, or in 1998, when they want to see how high they can go in the shuttle, they only reached a level of 350 miles from the Earth before the astronauts were experiencing what CNN reported as killer electrons, where with their suits on and deflector gear like they had in the Apollo mission, and only at 350 miles from the Earth, the astronauts could see flashes of radiation cross their cornea with their eyes closed. And it was getting more and more intense. And we know that the Van Allen belt doesn't get thick till at least 1,000 miles from the Earth and goes for 25,000 miles. And then there's actual footage showing the NASA astronauts faking being halfway to the moon while they were in low orbit. And all this and the evidence of the shadows and lights and that Russia was way ahead of us at the time of the space program and never claimed to have gone through the Van Allen belt. If somebody isn't skeptical after all these years since Apollo that no country has penetrated that barrier, you have to really wonder. And only robotic missions were able to deal with that level of radiation, and humans, biological life, with the technology that we now have, is not able to protect astronauts to get to the moon. Never mind get there in 3 days and land and launch off. When they went in 2012, it took a robotic mission 3.5 months to reach lunar orbit. And so, if you're not skeptical, this kind of like, to me, proves the point of this war on truth. And I'm also involved with a NASA, somebody who was involved with the NASA missions on Mars and the Voyager to the fifth moon of Uranus, who is, another person that I cover called Bart Jordan. And his information is almost unbelievable for most people, but I still find a lot of evidence that has some proof that he actually deciphered ancient languages that gave him advanced measurements, and has been helping the government with the space program and the Manhattan Project since he was very young. So this to me, what he states is that he has, over 100,000 years ago, humans were actually at the point of space travel and left information on Mars and placed the two moons into orbit of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, and from the asteroid belt, and we're communicating to their future, which is to us at this point what could happen with the element of too much carbon in the atmosphere, where Mars has a 95+% CO2 now, and they can't maintain the electromagnetic element that they once had, and now it's known that Mars used to have an atmosphere and be very Earth-like. And where we're going with the imbalance with the whole environment and the combustion of fossil fuels and other pollutions, we can kick off a exponential increase in the release of gases into the atmosphere that would suffocate our planet. And so this is all because we're not involved with truth and science, and there's oil companies that are wanting to make a profit, and they engage scientists to create doubt, and they engage even 9/11 truth activists that are somewhat phony in some level to counteract their truth of 9/11 with the so-called climate change hoax. It's really no hoax at all. There's an element of the planet getting warmer and the ocean's getting warmer and the sea is rising, and you can just look into the air and see all sorts of garbage, as well as the attempt to deflect the sun out back into space with chemtrails. We don't have real transparency anywhere, including our atmosphere. So this is the purpose of the work that I've been doing with Flyby News, covering all these issues based out of the understanding that the military-industrial complex has taken over science and truth and the space program and most of our minds. And so this is the time that we need to wake ourselves up and wake each other up. And,
yes.
And after this year, I'll probably go into writing the story from another way. But Flyby News has incredible amounts of resources on major topics, and I include health as well as UFO disclosure, and I have a freedom because I'm an independent individual journalist, so I can take chances and then learn from my mistakes. And so it's a work in progress, and there's a lot of resources that people can make use, and I'd like to be challenged with anything I have posted at flybynews.com in order to answer it, or maybe I could remove it and correct it. So I invite people to take the challenge to read what's there, know what's there, and get back there and realize there's a lot more to it than we all realize. And by uniting in these different movements with 9/11 and JFK and Cell Reserve and the Occupy, and if we could just see it all as one situation where there's a time for each group to unite with the other, either at a climate issue like the tar sands, or something like the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. I'm shocked that so many groups don't try to connect the dots, so they only stay in their one little pigeonhole. And you become.
And I'd like to touch on that if we can, Jonathan.
Please.
Right there, as far as what's been preventing us from taking our lives back here. Why are we continuing to be oppressed by this? It's because we stay divided as a people and over numerous issues. And you mentioned Colonel Bob Bowman, Dr. Bob Bowman, who recently passed away. And that was his message towards the end of his life. He was very strong on trying to wake the American people up to the fact that we are artificially divided. And there's people in leadership positions of all these groups, the anti-war group, the 9/11 movement, which questions the one and only reason given for the wars is the government's fairy tale around 9/11. So why is that a separate movement from the anti-war movement? That in itself should make people think, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So, and you've got people that are in the leadership positions of all these organizations that are there to keep us from coming together. There was a cartoon film a few years back, the Bug movie. I can't, maybe that was what it was called, the Bug movie, and it had the grasshopper speaking, saying, look, we've got to, anytime you see one of these ants speak up, you got to squash that ant, because if you don't, then the other ant is going to speak up, and before you know it, one ant might be small and easy for us to keep down, but when you get a whole bunch of them standing up, they'll knock us down, And that's why it's so important that there's so many different movements, but it's the same people behind what we're all trying to remedy, and the thing with the moon hoax, let's say the moon landing, why fool the public? Why mislead the public on the moon? Because there is a shitload of money in the space program. That's why. Why lie about being attacked by people from countries that you want to invade to get their oil and heroin and poppies and natural gas and minerals? Because there's a shitload of money in going into these other countries and taking their stuff. That's why. And it's the same people. It doesn't have to be that complicated. That's why we're lied to. It's you mentioned the false flag. And I just read the other day, Jonathan, that I remember reading a few years ago, it was costing over $1 million, $1.2 million per year to keep one foot soldier in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Okay, but follow that money. Who gets that 1.2 million? You see what I mean? We've got to follow that money. Who's benefiting from this? And it's the same war profiteers profiting off a war. And okay, well, follow the money even further is the banksters. Michael Rivero of WhatReallyHappened.com put out a wonderful documentary, a wonderful 43-minute film earlier this year entitled All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. And you can find that on a YouTube search, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars by Michael Rivero. When you issue the money and you lend it to governments, and then the governments are supposed to pay you back with interest. That's the way our monetary system works, through these private central bankers. You get in a war. Have you ever seen a National Defense Authorization Appropriations Act be voted down? That's why they throw so many things into these acts. Like the NDAA of 2012, they threw in that indefinite detention provision, Section 1021. But if any congressman votes against it, immediately the paid-for media start saying, he's not supporting the troops. He's not giving them the bullets and the equipment they need to defend themselves and fight for our freedoms. And it works every time. So we truly do have to follow the money, to all the way up to where the strings are being pulled, and see that it is all related. The space program, ton of money. The war on terror, ton of money. And do you think that these people are going to allow for the American people to come together in numbers large enough to actually threaten their card game there, their bread and butter? No, that's why we have to think for ourselves.
There's actually a new article posted at Flyby News by Peter Gabel on Tikkun Daily. It's called The Spiritual Truth of JFK as Movie and Reality. And, that's another article full of thoughts and ideas of why this 50th anniversary is a real moment for our generation and other generations that followed us and that came before us to unite in a way of just comprehending the significance of that time and the redirection of our whole direction as a world. And some of us were too young to respond. Some of us weren't even here. But it did happen, and there's a false history that continues to be perpetrated, and at least the majority of Americans still agree that there was a conspiracy involved and that the government's lone gunman theory is really a deception. And so that's somewhere that we're getting. And next step, I think, is realizing the element to cover that up had to be a very sophisticated intelligence, military, government, media, academic complex that keeps growing and using fear and money and greed to maintain control over what I consider we the people are basically good and loving, and people really do have an element of innocence that's being destroyed by those in charge that is claiming to have hold of truth and creating a distorted truth. And that's the greatest crime against all of us, is the element of truth being compromised by media officials and others that want to just control our minds. And there's fluorides in water and a lot of pharmaceuticals going around to maintain this numbing and this dumbing down of the people.
But the people are the only answer. The answer is us, and whatever's keeping us down, snap out of it, damn it. What does the truth have to do with peace? Hey, if we have any anti-war peace people out there, progressives, I don't know why peace is limited, being anti-war is limited to progressives for whatever reason. God forbid Americans of all stripes decide to come together. You might actually be able to stop the wars. But the truth has everything to do with peace. There's a great activist group out there that has chapters everywhere, maybe even in your own neighborhood. wearechange.org. wearechange.org. And their motto is, you want peace? Demand justice. Want justice? Demand the truth. Want the truth? Ask questions, demand answers. And every one of those pieces of that formula is necessary. The peace you don't get it until you get all the way down to the end, where you ask questions, demand answers. You got to go through the whole chain there. And I'm I've got a real bad taste in my mouth for the misleadership of the so-called peace movement, because I see it. And those others who see what's going on, speak up, because everybody's paying the price. Jonathan, you mentioned Chris Pratt, who you worked with. Does beautiful work, and I remember seeing his film Deceptions, and I do want to mention Chris's website, if you don't mind, for the listeners to take a look at. It's deceptionsusa.com, and he's done some beautiful work. I'm saddened that we're not able to get the 1 minute video that he did in regards to Bob Bowman. It's entitled "The Lie of 9/11" by Dr. Bob Bowman. And
I do have links to Bob Bowman Tribute Connection at flybynews.com, where you can
access it there
and watch the YouTube. And he also produced a video, the trailer for a new book that came out this year on the Kennedy assassination called Mary's Mosaic, the CIA conspiracy to murder John F. Kennedy, Mary Pinchot Meyer, and their vision for world peace. And this is an incredible book.
Yes.
And he's done a great job, which Peter Janney's using that as his official trailer for his book. And I guess Peter is on November 22nd is going to be at a large conference at Santa Barbara, California, that was organized about the 50th anniversary with a lot of the experts. John Hankey's going to be there. Jim Fetzer is one of the coordinators of it, and I think it's one of the greater JFK Truth conferences that we'll have in this country on that time, and it's turning out to be in Santa Barbara. So eventually they'll probably have a video on it, and we'll get it out. And we're also going to be making a video of the event this Friday at the Greenfield Community Television. And if you go to the Greenfield Community Television, I have about 10 programs that are produced there, and you can access the videos if you look for Flyby News in their playlist. Then you'll find, including the interview with Bob Bowman, where he, presented, and we inserted the 3-minute video that he produced on the smoking gun of 9/11 with WTC-7, and we discussed it in our backgrounds. And he's a spirit that you can feel always wherever he is, and I'm still feeling him. And when I was working on the tribute issue, the issue of Syria was happening, and I could feel a lot of connection with him to try to stop that almost close war that could have really engaged World War III on a new level. And that's one of the good things that Obama did in his presidency, was to turn that over to Congress, even though he was still saying he endorsed the bombing of the sovereign nation without being threatened. He still forced it back to Congress, which gave a little time, and then they ended up destroying all the weapons of his chemical supplies and working out a diplomatic solution. And hopefully this will lead towards friendlier relations with Iran and that whole country. And we just can't keep this neocon plan for taking over 5 countries in 7 years, as announced by Wesley Clark, and that he received a memo of it, which was the main purpose of September 11th, 2001, to engage a world domination plan on a new acceleration. And there's some resistance to it, and so we're not losing all the way. And again, if you watch my video, you'll see and learn about Senator Mike Gravel's proposal for a National Citizens Initiative for Democracy. ncid.us is his website, and I used the video clip that's on his website that explains this initiative that could be engaged without government interference, just by having more than the people that voted in the last presidential election sign up to amend the Constitution, vote for it, and then we accept it's in place, and then there'll be a national referendum system for popular votes to engage new investigations or enact new laws, but be another body, another check for this corrupt government that we're dealing with now. We, the people, would finally have a voice. So we can give it to ourselves. And that was my greatest disappointment with the Occupy movement, that it seemed like it came and go based on the media interpretation of what was going on and the police response, and there wasn't an actionable plan besides protesting. There wasn't saying, look, if we all did this, if the 99% did this, we'd get there, and this is what the NCID.US proposal is about, as well as a truth commission that would have to be engaged by those perpetrators against truth, because the truth will set us all free, and I'm hoping that there will be a time when amnesty and transformation can happen based on exposing all the deceptions that can possibly be exposed, and then beginning again, because as you say, without truth there is no justice, and without justice there will never be peace, and that's why we need a truth commission.
Exactly. You can't have any of them without the other, and that's how Jonathan, that's how Larry and I first joined up to as a partnership for this radio program back in November 2 years ago of 2011. Both Larry and I were guests on a show that the UnitedWeStrike.com, their monthly marathon, and they had Larry on as an activist and longtime activist and someone from the black community. And they had myself on as an activist from the so-called anti-war community, and we were talking about our take on the just starting up Occupy movement, and one of the things we warned about was what happened to the anti-war movement, that it would be co-opted, and the Tea Party as well, that's what happened. Yes, the police cracked down on the encampments and all that, but the big thing was it itself turned into a left-right thing, just like the anti-war movement wouldn't work with anyone on the right on issues, any kind of issues that they could find difference with. That was enough an excuse to not work with them. They call them strange bedfellows or whatever. That's now the national leadership of Veterans for Peace is calling other groups that they could be working with unacceptable bedfellows. But I'll tell you what, man, you got a chance to increase your numbers to stop the war, which is supposedly what you're in existence for. That's supposedly your purpose for being, and you don't do that. Who's the strange one? But
we need to collaborate. Bart Jordan has a great saying. He says ask any bird, it takes two wings to fly.
Yeah.
And you just can't do it with one wing. And
you know what? The wings are the same, damn it. Scrap the labels. Free yourself. And, but Larry and I we began our program. Our first episode was on, January 15 of 2012, Martin Luther King's, birthday, his actual birthday. And I think, the second or third month, we had, these folks from Oregon, somewhere in Oregon. As I mentioned, the Occupy groups were just starting up in the fall of 2011, and we spoke in the first hour about the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the funding bill for the military. It's the annual funding bill for the military, and what the government does is, or people do in the government, they throw in things that normally wouldn't get passed easily into a bill like something, the National Defense Authorization Act, because it's, if you vote against the act, you're voting against the troops. And it's an easy way for them to get something like the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act indefinite detention provision of Americans on American soil. And that went through, and I'm very happy to see, not too many people know about this on either the right or the left, But out there in Oregon, I forget what town it was, city, members of the local Tea Party patriot groups got together with the Occupy group, and to say either one is nonpartisan, neither left or right, is bullshit. If you're Tea Party 912, you're watching Fox News, you're the right. You know, if you're Occupy progressive, whatever, no matter what you say, when you get in there and look who's there and talk to, you're the left, you know, and there's people in place there to make sure the two don't mix. But these folks got together around the NDAA indefinite detention provision. And what had happened was, Jonathan, they were physically together for a demonstration because there were some good people that put the purpose before, the nonsense, the politics, right? And they reached out and they were able to organize this event. And what that led to is more work together, like what you're doing with these community gatherings. They actually did some public television themselves and started having panels and taking on other topics. But again, this was not something that was applauded by either the Occupy around the country or the Patriot groups or the Tea Party groups, because this is something the powers that be don't want us to see. And I do want to finish up on this NDAA thing. I think this really makes my point here, is that within weeks of this indefinite detention provision, you know, the ink was still not dry yet, right? And you had the hero on the left, Chris Hedges, and a bunch of other prominent people on the left filed a lawsuit against the administration, the president, the government. The very same day, or within a few days of that, Republican Congressman Ron Paul also submitted a 1-paragraph piece of legislation that simply would have stricken that provision out of the act, which would have made no need whatsoever for a lawsuit, because there would be nothing to file a lawsuit against, you see. But the people on the left, did not want anyone to know about, which included Chris Hedges and the rest. I didn't hear a word to this day coming out of their mouth talking about Ron Paul's piece of legislation, saying, hey, here's another way we can get rid of this provision, get behind it as well, call your congressman. Heck, you didn't see them get up on stage together, right? You didn't see them do the things that could actually have gotten rid of this indefinite detention provision. And here's the thing. Ron Paul was a Republican, and he was running for president. It was a presidential year. Election year. The people on the left were already concerned about their flock going over to vote for Ron Paul, a Republican, instead of whoever the Democrat was going to be, Obama, because this guy was actually going to stop the war. And then again, let's back up. Actually stop the war. Well, what's the anti-war group's reason for being? Wait a minute. You see what I mean? We've got to look at this for what it is, and I believe we've got to call it out, and we've got to say, pay attention to the man behind the curtain. This ain't what you think it is. And now, what is it, 2 years later, or how many years later? We got that indefinite detention provision. We got drones as a common practice, because of this kind of crap. We've got to start addressing this misleadership within both the left and the right, and make each side answer for themselves. So, boy, there was a lot on the soapbox there. Thanks for indulging me, Jonathan.
Well, we have to more than just reacting to each situation that comes before us. We have to look and understand the key elements that brought us to where we are, and then find, in exposing, what can we expose together that, and when, and unite with as many as possible to make some sort of change. So that's the purpose of this. I produced this film on these 4 key issues that I feel like are key for any citizen to understand the element of betrayal and concern that every human citizen is under right now, based on these 4 conspiracies: 9/11, JFK, the Federal Reserve, and moon landing program deception. And then by connecting those 4, or even if you can only get to 3, I can understand this one is a hard one, but even if you get to 3 and leave an open mind for the 4th one, you'll see how these connect with, as you say, follow the money trail, and then seeing the actual perpetrators that have control over just our republic and our democracy. So fear is really a key element. And when we read 1984 back in school, I think you probably were of age when it was required reading in school. You saw it from the outside. You kind of think of that's the USSR, or it's over there. And then slowly the realization is that it exists right here, right now. This thought police. There's a lot of control over just the way we can think as free people and critical thinking. So that's the challenge. And then if we have enough of a critical mass awakening, there'll be more pressure for those working in the governments and services to come forward and announce their intention for being true to revealing any deception that's a crime against humanity and against our Constitution. Every president since Kennedy has taken the sworn oath to uphold and defend and protect the Constitution, has distorted the element of what the Constitution is all about. And Obama has been the ultimate, hypocrite regarding his professor of the constitutional law to then come in and create and go further down the road from where Bush began, with a national security state that has nothing to do with the principles of our U.S. Constitution. So we're under siege at this point. Getting out of it isn't that easy. There's no one person, I believe, that, or you can't do it from the top down.
No, other way around. Yeah.
It has to be us, as you say. Yeah, the piece, all the different groups. Okay, where do we agree? Because they'll support infighting in every group. So, like you have 9/11, you have this infighting right around the 10th anniversary. I finished making my film, and that's why the original version has 9/11 first, and then it goes into the other events. And it just, people would argue with the details, and to the point where you think you were fighting one another rather than influencing other people that just looked at you and said, "Well, I'll stay away from that group because it's not fun. It's confusing, and there's destructive elements in it, and that's placed there. It's not the people's fault." And so we're up against a lot of funding and support for creating destabilization within our groups, as well as control over the mainstream media and what the majority of Americans think. So if we have any opportunity, I think there's 2 ways of doing it. There's a way of using these anniversaries and these moments to unite behind truth, and there's the inevitable collapse of falsehood that will leave us to saying, what can we do now? And I think the Constitution, the original intent of this Constitution, where all are created equal, and not just the idea of that, but the reality of that, is a good backbone for self-governing ourselves in a collective way, and democracy, having a majority make decisions rather than a very few people make the decision, they'll generally do the right thing, or they'll learn how to improve. And so that would be a revolutionary element to have democracy and a republic that is based on a constitution. And so, we're not really radical. We're really the conservative ones. So, and those running the country, they're radical and they're rogue and destructive. And it's really good to have Larry in here. I'd like to get, if he's still on, more of his thoughts on this information.
Well, yes, I'm definitely here.
Because, I had a lot of friends that were in the Black Panthers, and I've had correspondence with Malik Abdullah Akili and other friends that were in prison, because they were black and trying to defend their communities, and they experienced the system like I never experienced it, and you have that awareness, and you're willing to unite with us peace activists to overcome, the differences. And that's very a good thing, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, the fact is, Jonathan, that if we're going to, as Gil Scott-Heron said, you got to work for change. Change doesn't happen, by osmosis. Change happens by hard work. And I do want to say that as far as the so-called left-right paradigm that Phil's been talking about, and Phil and I both talk about a lot, we've really got to put that crap aside. I come out of, and an operative term or word is out, I come out of the left. I haven't been a section leader in the Panther Party, haven't been chair of the Black National Independence Party, I can go on and on and on. The point is that you reach a point, as Brother Malcolm did, he evolved. That's, of course, when they murdered him. As Brother Martin also did when he made it clear that we make judgments based on the content of people's character, not the color of their skin. So what the power elite, the national and global power elite did was they went and they got this colored guy, quote unquote, Barack Obama, who very few people know anything about. He is one of them, not one of us. In other words, he's one of the elite. He does not represent everyday, ordinary black, white, brown, red, or yellow people. And we need to be honest with ourselves about that. The so-called anti-war movement is a sham. They are a sham. And I'm sure Phil has a lot to say about that. But they're playing, this divide and conquer game. And the Republicans, I call them Democrats and Republicans, I call them Republicrats, because what they both have are a misleadership elite. They do not want ordinary, everyday black, white, brown, red, and yellow people to come together. I don't give a damn what they say. They do not want us to unite. They fear that. Because then we can form a critical mass and we can actually bring about systemic change. And much of and that's what we have to bring about, is systemic change from the bottom up, not the top down. And the so-called infighting going on in certain groups, oftentimes, quite frankly, and I'm not pointing fingers, but I'm just being real. If anybody knows anything about COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, they know that, and it still exists, by the way, no matter what name they want to call it. But it exists to discredit, to cause dissension, to neutralize. These are terms that the government uses, and this is precisely what has been going on. As Brother Malcolm said, we can have our differences, but we should have those differences in the closet, euphemistically speaking, and come out as a united front together to fight for peace and justice, not always fight against, fight for peace and justice. So I believe very strongly, as someone I was a political prisoner for 10 years of my life in some of the worst prisons in this country. I self-authored my case, self-authored it successfully through the United Nations. Why? Did I believe in the UN? Not necessarily, but I did believe in getting the information out to the world. The information, and by information, I mean how our are human rights. I emphasize human rights as opposed to civil rights, because human rights is all inclusive. I wanted to get out the fact that the human rights of black, white, brown, red, and yellow, everyday ordinary people are being abused in this country and throughout the world. But this is a country that I grew up in. This is a country that my father and grandfather and great-great-grandfather died and fought for. Okay, this is the country. Okay, so I have to begin at home, here, with my brothers and sisters of all colors. And as we said in the party, all power to the people. We meant that. All power to the people. Black, white, brown, red, and yellow people. But we've got to do it today. We've got to do it tomorrow. We've got to do it collectively. And yes, we're going to have our differences. We're not robots. We don't want robots. We don't want liars. But we have to use our common sense. And I believe we can win. I believe it's going to be difficult. I believe there's going to be a lot of sacrifices entailed, but we've got to do it. And that's really all I have to say. But, Jonathan, I really appreciate you and persons like you who speak up. Of course, there are always the naysayers, those who choose to mock, choose not to critically think, choose to ignore the reality, choose to be ostriches. But you know one thing about the ostrich is when the ostrich has its head in the sand, its butt is sticking up and it's being kicked. So on that note, I'll end.
Thank you, Larry. Well, thank you, Larry. And I just want to tag on to that a little, Jonathan, that by coming together and working on something that affects us all doesn't mean that we have to become friends with these folks that we disagree with on other issues or just don't like for whatever reason. It doesn't mean we have to give in on our positions. None of that. Maintain your who you are. But damn it, there's times when the job's got to get done and we need each other to get the job done. And that's where we are in this country, man. Our country's been taken from us and we got to take it back. And as long as we keep divided on this stuff that the misleaders know that we differ on, that's, I believe after a while it's voluntary, man. We're doing it ourselves. And shed the labels, folks. Take off your jerseys with the D and the R and the progressive and the conservative and toss them and see what we can do together on the important stuff. Jonathan, I did want to ask you, we're coming towards we got about 15 minutes left in the program. And I did want to ask you how, for folks listening, how would they go about doing some of the things that you've done there in Western Mass with the community events and the local access television, things like that? Can you share a little bit of that, just in case someone out there is listening, wants to get active in their own community and try to replicate what you've been doing so well up there in Massachusetts?
Well, we have a lot of tools with the internet. Google, the search engines. You can just touch in on your town, your area for a community TV station and find it. And they'll accept any video you gave them if you're from there in their area to show on their network. And they also have classes, and they'll teach you how to use the equipment to produce different programs or pull things together. There's also meetup pages that makes it very simple to form a group. But meetup.com. Meetup.com. You can join up and get support to. And you can visit valley911truth.org to see the meetup groups that I helped form in Western Massachusetts regarding the 9/11 events. The trouble with that group specifically is that we've been working on this issue for so long. It tends to just people are just taking in information and they're involved with their lives. So I think you really have to deal with oneself spiritually on a certain level and say, am I being influenced by fear or am I influenced by love? They both don't happen at the same time, and a lot of people that think they're coming from love are really, if they go deeper, they'll see that there's some fear covering it up. And it's wonderful to find our own fears, because once we discover a fear and we can accept it and look at it and see it in the light, it kind of dissipates, and you can do something about it. And I think, just anybody listening to this conversation has confronted their fears to a tremendous degree, more than most people. But that's the pathway I consider is making choices out of love rather than fear, and then just communicating. You can contact me. NoFlyby@yahoo.com is my usual email address, and there's just a lot to a lot of tools that we have. It has to be with that's connected with you. But my idea, what you're saying about united we stand and divided we fall, is most crucial. So if you join any group, encourage them to expand their sites so they can unite with others around them that's covering different angles, and the more collaboration, the better. We have certain things that we can all agree upon. That's why I love working with Veterans for Peace, because the Constitution and what Larry was saying, how we grew up here and we have a certain allegiance to our ideals that we grew up with and we want to maintain just for ourselves, our families, and our neighbors, our world. And it comes out of the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to read a little bit of that because I shared this in the JFK and the Fed movie, and it touches me, and it gives us instructions. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And if we don't take our country in this form, then we've given up, and we shouldn't call this, a republic or a country that we were born to, because in 1963, everything turned around, and we're still in this destabilized era where we need to get back to the basics and the elements of what made us, a good country, and what all the veterans that fought for our country. And my dad was a World War II veteran, and all the sacrifice has been done for nothing if we enabled that corruption to enter within. And that's what we're up against.
And shame on us. I'll say it. Shame on us. At least those of us as a whole is what I'm saying. Right. There was a coup d'etat in 1963 when the president's head was blown off in broad daylight in front of everybody. And it's been 50 years. And, the folks that pulled that coup have not, out of the goodness of their heart, given our country back. We got to take it back. And my God, how bad does it have to get? Look at where we are now. It's just the same people that killed Kennedy. If you look at the materials on Jonathan Mark's website, flybynews.com, they're the same people that are running the show today, and giving us all this other crap. So we've got to get real about it, And we've got to toss this silly crap that's keeping us arguing with each other, and take on a job that needs to get done. And boy, Jonathan, we've been really lucky to have you for the whole 2 hours tonight. There is still
On the Shoulders of Giants, and John Hankey's film is available on Netflix. So. During this time, I would encourage people to get Dark Legacy, George Bush, and the Murder of John F. Kennedy. Kevin Thomas in the Los Angeles Times wrote about it. He said, provocative to say the least, using materials familiar to researchers, Dark Legacy makes a series of tantalizing connections between the rich and powerful to suggest that Kennedy was brought down by a vast web of powerful conservatives and that George H.W. Bush was close to all of them. Hankey invites viewers not only to draw their own conclusions, but also to check out his sources. And anybody could then discredit Hankey. They can, but it can't, because he has the evidence that you hear firsthand, forensic proof of the original doctors that examined him, and then you see the manipulation and what went on, and all the changes of history. And so now we have generations behind us, Phil, that have no idea of what the real history is. And,
yes,
and that's
this is a critical time.
Yeah.
To save ourselves and those behind us, those after us, man, we have got to get this message out to each other to save our own asses. And I'm swearing tonight. I don't usually do that, but I guess that's...
Oh, you might have to go to my spiritual and health blog. I mean,
yes.
at flybynews.com, I mean, if you go under the 4 paragraphs that you could get lost in if you go to all the links, but if you keep reading down a little bit further, you'll find key resource links and articles, and that's where you'll see the updated energy pollution's impact on our environment, the new 9/11 investigation versus New World Order, UFO documentation, and Flyby News Health and Spiritual blog, which I've learned over 25 years to realize that if I deal with appreciation, introspection, look at myself, and respect, then I'm not using other people and other judgments to hide from my own fears and my own awareness. It's a way of that we all need to evolve, and we all need to appreciate the gift of life, because as much as we think we know very little, and what we do experience shows us that there's an element of promise and hope and lasting nature to just life itself, and the elements of what makes us who we are, and that's where we connect with people like Bob Bowman, and we feel like his spirit continues because of the truth that he lived and the truth that he is wherever he is right now.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.